Thank you for listening, but please be aware that I don't just believe shit I hear on podcasts, and I hope you don't either. Be skeptical and look into things for yourself. If you find that I was wrong about something, the best thing you can do for me is to let me know. You can do that at livingthroughextinction@gmail.com. Please also be aware of the fact that I do swear and I don't bleep anything out, so listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Ruby, and this is episode 120 of Living Through Extinction, a short to the point podcast with science, skepticism, and activism, environment and wildlife, and stuff I find important or interesting that I want to learn more about. Today I talk about the Internet Archive, making great use of banana agriculture waste, whale falls, and banning conversion therapy in Kentucky. If you've joined me before, then thank you for returning. I really do appreciate you. If this is your first time listening to Living Through Extinction, welcome, and thanks for giving it a try. I hope you find it both fun and informative. And if you're interested in supporting the show, all the possible ways are listed after the final segment and thank yous. Oh, and this is my emotional support drits. There's no direct skeptical segment today. I was going to do it on the Wayback Machine and ended up reading about the entire Internet Archive. So the main will be about that. And a small skeptical bit will be included in there when I get to the part of the Internet Archive called the Wayback Machine. So beginning today with some news that could help textile factories be much more eco-friendly. Pakistan's textile sector is responsible for significant greenhouse gas emissions, as well as water pollution and microplastic pollution. There is a new project with the goal of converting the agriculture waste from the banana growing industry, which can be up to 80 million metric tons per year, to energy and textiles. Then the waste generated from that process is used to produce renewable energy. Man, if only we could have discovered methods like this ages ago. The project was awarded $330,000 by UK's Energy Catalyst program. This is an award that goes to businesses and organizations that are developing, quote, highly innovative market-focused energy technologies that enable access in sub-Saharan Africa and South or Southeast Asia, unquote. Sindh, where the majority of the bananas are grown, has had poor to zero electricity access for ages. This waste-to-energy technology will provide clean, affordable energy to about half of those who've been going without. It will benefit the textile industry by providing a clean, renewable fabric and reducing their impact on the environment at the same time. It will benefit the banana growing community by providing both jobs and electricity. And it will benefit the environment by reducing plastic waste that comes from traditional clothing and by making what energy is produced clean and renewable. There really are no drawbacks to this method. Whale falls have definitely been mentioned at some point on this podcast journey of mine, but according to my segment list, it's never been a topic. When a whale dies, it sinks to the bottom of the ocean where the carcass becomes a whale fall, a complex, unique little ecosystem. Maybe little isn't exactly the right word, but it's little compared to most ecosystems. The deepest parts of the ocean floor are known to not be very life-friendly. There isn't a lot down there to provide the energy required for living organisms. And the sun doesn't reach these depths, so there's no energy to be gained there. But when a whale fall is formed, suddenly there's nourishment and shelter for all sorts of life. It will attract hagfish, sleeper sharks, microbes, mussels, clams, worms, crabs, members of the jellyfish family, and more. And these creatures and microbes will all come together to create a fairly localized biodiverse ecosystem. It's expected that these little ecosystems go on for up to 12 years before the carcass either disintegrates or is covered by sediment on the ocean floor. Up until 2021, there had only been 50 found worldwide. Eric Terrell and Sophia Merrifield are oceanographers from Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego. They led surveys in 2021 and 2023 of 135 square miles of seafloor of the San Pedro Basin, a part of the Santa Monica Basin. Their work took place about 15 miles from shore in an area commonly used as an industrial dumping ground in the early to mid-1900s. Unfortunately, A lot of what they found there were barrels containing the banned pesticide DDT and its toxic byproducts. Fucking humans, man. We fucking suck. To think the US is actually on its way back to these days of being allowed to dump the worst of the worst into the world's oceans. Fuck. They also found tens of thousands of naval weapons, but they also found 60 whale skeletons in this relatively small area, more than all the whale falls found worldwide in 44 years. The researchers said that based on finds up to then, the number is higher than would be expected by a factor of 5. To put it in a bit more perspective, I mentioned earlier that the carcass probably lasts about 12 years. According to the researchers, even if they lasted up to 70 years, they still would have never expected to find an area this dense with them. This find is very unexpected. The carcasses are from gray whales, blue whales, humpbacks, fin whales, sperm whales, and minke whales, and there are a few thoughts as to why this dense area might exist. They observed them with underwater autonomous vehicles that were able to take pictures, video, and other data from a handful of the carcasses. One very strange observation was that no bone-eating worms are present. I know I've talked about these guys before. They are the most common inhabitant of a whale fall ecosystem. The entire skeleton should be covered in these guys, giving it an almost carpeted appearance. The lack of them could explain the skeletons lasting much longer and causing more of a buildup than would be expected. But as I mentioned earlier, they could last up to 70 years and still not result in this many in one spot. Or at least that's what we thought up till now. Another thing that may add to their possible longevity is the fact that there is no river flow into the ocean nearby, so less sediment is flowing to cover things up. So both of the main factors that contribute to whale falls disappearing are hindered, causing them to last longer. But again, this still doesn't seem to explain this massive number in one place. Something that does make sense is something that I've talked about before: the ship traffic at the ports in Los Angeles and Long Beach. These are the two busiest ports in all of the US. On top of that, thousands of gray whales migrate through this area every year, and blue whales come through to feed on a regular basis. So we have both high ship traffic and high whale traffic in the same smallish area. As a result, it's thought that maybe more whales die here from being hit by ships than anywhere else. So this could definitely be adding to the collection in the waters here. But still, where are the bone worms? Another possibility is that more areas like this do exist, but this is the highest resolution survey technology is allowed to date. Maybe we're on the verge of finding more locations like this. The researchers say that if we do start to find more areas of the world where whale falls are lasting for decades or more, quote, the big oceanographic picture would be different, unquote. Now that would be interesting. There are future missions planned to look for more specific information. Imaging will be used to search for ship strike trauma, and more details about life present and not present will be recorded. Also to be fleshed out is the actual role these decomposing whales are playing in the ocean's carbon and nutrient cycle. They say that decomposing whales may be able to transport and sequester more carbon on the seafloor than previously thought. Too bad we took the population down so much before making the atmosphere this bad. They won't likely have the opportunity to fully get back to their natural numbers and start fixing up the ocean until we are long gone. Shit, this wasn't supposed to be a negative segment. I don't know why my brain went there. What we are clear on at this time is that whale falls are crucial for supporting life and biodiversity in the deepest parts of the ocean, as well as helping in the efforts to sequester carbon long term. They are also the perfect example of the cycle of life. The death of the whale literally fosters life for millions of other creatures. I fucking love that. Today I want to talk about archive.org and the Wayback Machine, and I'm a little worried about doing this one justice in case Sam from Witch Police Radio listens. To quote him directly, the Internet Archive is a magical dream world, unquote. I've already had a bunch of notes laid out to do a segment on this for several months. It kept getting pushed for alternate topics, but I kept my notes, figuring I'd talk about it eventually. Then, enough time had passed that I kind of forgot about it when we were at a podcast meetup. Hi to the Manitoba podcast crew. And Sam started talking about how he has everything he ever did on the Internet Archive. As he's telling everyone how awesome it is. My brain is telling me I know what he's talking about, but I'm not placing it. And then he mentioned the part of the Internet Archive known as the Wayback Machine, and that triggered it all to pop back into place in my frontal cortex. So when I got home, I looked for and found the notes and decided it was finally time to get it out on the next recording. The Internet Archive was founded by Brewster Kahle in 1996. It's a nonprofit, extensive digital library containing thousands of collections of digitized materials. One of their missions is to provide universal access to all knowledge. I first learned about it when I first got into scientific skepticism because of the Wayback Machine, which is one of the thousands of collections contained in the archive. It's a good way to look at previous versions of a website. It comes particularly handy with scam sites or sites that make changes and try to claim they never had that on their site or they never promoted this on their site. Well, you can use the Wayback Machine to actually look at previous versions of their site and catch them in a lie. The name was inspired by the Wayback Machine on the segment of the Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoon called Peabody's Improbable History. The earliest known archived webpage was saved on May 10th, 1996. The Internet Archive's web crawlers have collected and saved hundreds of billions of web captures since then. In 2001, all of these archived web pages were made available to the public through the Wayback Machine, and so skeptics started making use of it for skeptical inquiry. It does have limits, of course. It only works on sites that were publicly available. It also doesn't contain any chat systems or personal emails. That's not what it's about. Kahle noticed that a lot of culture and heritage artifacts of the modern world are digital and not physical. They cannot be preserved in the same way as a statue or a building. He set out to create a way to preserve as much of the public internet as possible, seeing these past web pages as glimpses into the digital world of a different time. He hoped this would be useful to researchers, historians, scholars, and more. It's kind of like thinking about a digital museum for digital artifacts. One just has to type in the URL and a date range, and they can view older versions of the site in question. They can find out what the URL was previously used for. They can view all of the past versions of a site. This is also a way to view websites that no longer exist. It's proven itself useful to journalists, skeptics, legal researchers, and more. For some, they may use it to observe how often their competitors are updating their websites. Even web developers make use to access past versions and identify where a bug may have got into programming. And all that is just the teeny tiny part of the Internet Archive called the Wayback Machine. These days, it's so much more. In late 1999, different types of collections were added. They weren't just preserving web pages anymore. They added collection categories for texts, audio, images, softwares, a bunch of them. Each collection can contain hundreds of subcategories of collections. For example, under images, you will find moving images, and then under moving images, there'll be even more subcategories under that, such as newsreels, movies, TV shows, etc. Under audio, there'll be music, radio shows, audiobooks, etc. Of course, each of these subcategories also has subcategories of their own. In 2020, the archive announced Internet Archive Scholar, where they would be archiving and preserving open access academic journals and digitizing 18th century journals. Another part of the archive is the Open Library. For this collection, they seek to someday include a webpage for every book ever published. They also scan and archive open domain books, usually donated by libraries. Scanning is financially supported by libraries and foundations. Today, the archive makes use of over 30 scanning centers in 5 different countries, providing a constant supply of new information. And the audio archive contains music, audiobooks, news broadcasts, old-time radio shows, podcasts, and so much more. The images collection contains more than 3.5 million items. Within here, one will find the Cover Art Archive, which collects record and CD art, an archive hosted for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is a gallery of its displays, an archive hosted for NASA, where one can view their massive collection. Archives for maps, classic cartoons, pro-war propaganda, anti-war propaganda, early television, early news shows, home movies, and so much more, all just under images. When donations come in from universities, libraries, museums, etc., the digital copy is made, and both the hard copy and a digital copy are returned to the original owner. If the item is not something available in the public domain, then it's loaned out like a library does. The file is loaned to just one person at a time. But unlike physical libraries, it's loanable to anyone in the world who has access to the internet. They also have a microfilm archive with items received from several universities. And then there are the open educational resources. This is where one can find free courses, video lectures, and supplemental materials for universities. An interesting political story around the Internet Archive happened when they announced the building of the Internet Archive in Canada in 2016. Despite them having locations in other countries as well, this started a rumor. The story that spread was that they were making a backup location out of the country, but still in this part of the world, because of the upcoming Trump presidency. But then a statement was made by Kale on November 9th of 2016 that kind of makes one think maybe it wasn't just a rumor after all. I'm going to quote the whole thing here, and you'll see what I mean. On November 9th, 2016, we woke up to a new administration promising radical change. It was a firm reminder that institutions like ours, built for long-term, need to design for change. For us, it means keeping our cultural materials safe, private, and perpetually accessible. It means preparing for a web that may face greater restrictions. It means serving patrons in a world in which government surveillance is not going away. Indeed, it looks like it will increase. Throughout history, libraries have fought against terrible violations of privacy, where people have been rounded up simply for what they read. At the Internet Archive, we are fighting to protect our readers' privacy in the digital world. Unquote. This statement does hint at the Canadian location absolutely having to do with the Trump presidency. With 2024 looking at much harsher restrictions and an authoritarian government this time, I bet they're relieved to have a Canadian location right now. Until that far-right authoritarian bullshit comes here anyway. Today, just about anybody, free of charge, can go to the Internet Archive and access over 160,000 public domain books, over 15 million audio files, 12 million software programs, over 160,000 microfilmed items, almost 4,000 feature films, over 272,000 concerts, over 25 million research articles and scholarly documents, 107 million academic journal articles, and 866 billion past and present web pages. It is a part of the International Internet Preservation Consortium and was officially designated as a library by the state of California in 2007. They're always in search of donation of digital materials for preservation. So if you have something that you feel is important or maybe interesting to future generations, send it to info@archive.org. And remember to always be skeptical, damn it. Kentucky has joined 23 other states, along with the District of Columbia, in protecting kids by banning conversion therapy from being performed on minors. 21% of LGBTQ+ youth in Kentucky report being threatened with or subjected to the torture of conversion therapy, which includes electric shock, hypnosis, and inducing nausea. The American Medical Association openly opposes the practice, as the evidence shows it reduces a child's self-esteem and induces self-harm and suicidal ideation. A quote from the executive order. The Commonwealth has a strong interest in protecting the health, safety, and welfare of all its citizens, including LGBTQ+ youth. The Commonwealth also has a significant interest in ensuring that state and federal funds are used for evidence-based services and not for unethical, dangerous, and contraindicated practices that medical professionals find are not credible and oppose. Practices like conversion therapy risk harm to our youth. Unquote. And I'll add that it doesn't just risk harm, it's harmful, period. I've listened to a lot of people tell their stories, and the results of these fucking conversion therapy places are horrific. Maybe I should do a segment on them, but I'm warning you now, it would be really hard to listen to. When Andy Beshear, one of the only Democrats running in a red state, realized that Republicans were never going to agree to vote on the ban, he stepped up and signed an executive order to protect the children and give state agencies the power to discipline anyone who sends a child to or performs conversion therapy practices on a child. There's no legitimacy behind it. Christian bigotry makes them believe that their children are broken. They have the misguided belief that being gay is not just sinful, but something that anyone who wants to can change. Like every gay kid under Christian rule didn't pray every single day to be changed. Conversion therapy is harmful and traumatic and has lifelong tragic effects on those who are forced to undergo it. They tell kids that they are mentally ill just for being honest about who they are inside. Kids are forced to pretend or risk being sent back. That's the story I hear the most. People who came back from that hell and then did everything they could to hide who they were so they would never be sent back. That's not helping. It's torture to pretend to be something you're not to everyone you know for years on end. A quote from Mr. Bashir, who we need to thank for actually stepping up for actual kids instead of pretending to like Republicans always do. Kentucky cannot possibly reach its full potential unless it is free from discrimination by or against any citizen, unless all of our people feel welcome in our spaces, feel free from unjust barriers, and supported to be themselves. Unquote. You can't force someone to change on the inside. You're only forcing them to pretend. That may make you feel better, but your child is being eaten up inside by everything they do and say that doesn't fit who they actually are. Forcing a kid to pretend their way through life is incredibly mentally unhealthy. Believe me, I lived it by pretending to believe in a God from the time I was about 9. Never bought into any of it. Never agreed with any of it. None of it made any sense to me. But I had to pretend that it did for all of my formative years. When everyone around was constantly talking like there's an afterlife, it was hard for me to deal with. It sure would be nice if there was one, but isn't it better to stay rooted in reality? My brain just didn't work the same way as everyone around me. I think that's why I've always been so empathetic of LGBT kids who are also forced to pretend. It's a trauma to present a lie on the outside to everyone you know and love for years and years. Some people live that lie their entire life. What it comes down to is no government of any free society should ever support such an unscientific and unethical practice. And it's good news to hear that one more state has decided to do the right thing. Thanks to a Democrat, of course.